person panelists. Margie said she's seeing common nighthawks and Chuckwill's widows on Lakewood Ranch Boulevard. Awesome. So, Evan Powers in Sarasota, backyard, Loggerhead Shrike.
Nice, Evan. I saw one at Gothenbach the other day. My swallow-tailed kite's back, the one from my neighborhood. He's
nice.
around every day. I don't know if it's a he or a she, but
I'll be around right away.
I know. Come on over. They're back.
That's it? Nobody's seeing anything else?
There were a few migrants coming through. I know Kathy saw one the other day. She saw some cool, I can't remember what she saw exactly. She saw a warbler that was interesting.
Sue Herring, little blue heron, trotting around our walkway in Longwood Run. Oh, how fun. I can just picture that. Trying to think what I saw. It was a Cape May. Margie, turtles were out in the rains today.
Cape May is what Kathy saw. Now that you typed it, I remembered.
Maybe it came up here.
Maybe it was the same one.
That was a beauty. I'm hearing hooded, but they're way high in the canopy and I have not spotted them. Oh, I saw a scarlet tanager too.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's fun to be in the woods. All right. Well, I guess that's it. So you want to get started, Sarah?
Sure. Well, this is the last talk of the season. I know a lot of people have gone back up north and the weather's starting to get hot and we even got rain, which is very exciting. So big thing that we're talking about now, because we're going to be cleaning up all the membership files and getting ready for the next season. So membership now does offer you some benefits. So you can sign up for events early, like the Eagle Trolley and the Carefree Learner. It'll give you early access to those. And then there's going to be some members only events that we're going to have over the course of the next year that you would need to be a member to attend. So just make sure, and there's discounts in the gift shop. So if you are not a member, go ahead and renew your membership and get in there, because I don't want you to miss out on those opportunities. And then we should have the next schedule out. We work on that over the summer and we should have that to you by August or September. So be on the lookout for that. We'll make sure we email it out as soon as we have a schedule locked and loaded for next year. But we're winding things down for the season. Garden's looking good. And it's getting quieter and quieter at the Nature Center. It's getting hot. But we're already working on next year and it's going to be very, very exciting.
Naomi is having issues with the chat, but she saw yellow warblers going through Ottawa at Wood Lake. So up in Canada. Cool. All right. All right. Well, I'm going to stop share and turn it over to Margie. Oh, well, first, let me just go over the logistics. I forget, I've been doing this so long, but we could have some newcomers. So if you have questions for our speaker, you put them in the Q&A. It's easier for us to follow. If you have questions about logistics, put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. And yeah, well, that's really about it. And turn it over.
I did have one more thing. You'll see fencing up around the quads because they are actually starting to do some work over there. As soon as we either get rains or irrigation, you'll start to see them really moving some earth over there, but the fencing is up now. So if you see that, that's what's going on over there. It's pretty exciting.
Is
They need irrigation. They need rain for irrigation.
No, rain or irrigation. So we need the rains to come consistently, or we need FPL to come with power so that we can have irrigation for all the new plants we're gonna plant.
Oh, cool.
to
Yeah.
establish the plants.
To
Yeah.
establish the plants.
Once
We're
they're
not
in-
irrigating for the first couple of years, and then
Yeah.
once they're established, we'll have a forest that hopefully is self-sustaining.
Great. So it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Megan Suau. Suau, am I pronouncing your name right? I should know by now between you and your father.
You're doing great, Suau. It's easier than it looks.
Suau. Cool. It's such a neat name. So Megan is a Sarasota native. She's an architect whose career focused on impactful projects that prioritize community-driven design. And she is most noted for what she did in Rwanda, collaborating on the design and construction of the Ellen DeGeneres Campus of the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. And she did that, or this was done in partnership with the Government of Rwanda. It was an award-winning project demonstrating how locally driven design can be a force for environmental conservation and ecological restoration. So as I understand it, you will present attainable design strategies for diverse, healthy, and productive habitats for human, animal, and ecological growth. So Megan is currently working with Sweet Sparkman Architects in St. Pete and Sarasota, where she's been for the past 7 months.
Mhm.
And before that, she worked in Boston, I presume it was Boston, the Mass Design Group for over 6 years. And 3.5 of those years were in Rwanda full-time?
5 years in Rwanda.
5
full-time.
years, wow. Wow, that's so very impressive. She has a BA from the University of Florida in design architecture, and she has a master's of architecture from the University of Virginia. So thank you very much for being here. Please take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you for that warm introduction, Margie. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Can you all see?
There. Yep. Came
Great.
up.
As Margie said, I'm Megan. I'm an architect. I am not a biologist. I am not an avid bird watcher. I am not an ecologist or a landscape architect. I think architecture is maybe one of the last generalist professions that is left. And through architecture, it's allowed me to be exposed to a lot of different fields, one of which is landscape ecology, which I'll talk a little bit about today. But first, I want to introduce you to our team that worked on the Ellen DeGeneres Campus of the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. These are our other architects that I worked with in Rwanda. Adam, Bethel, Emily, and then myself in yellow, Yusuf and Teo. Architecture is a very collaborative profession. It's something that you can't do alone. So these folks are very present in what I'll present to you today. And what brought me to Rwanda was really being able to work with this organization called Mass Design Group. And Mass is maybe one of the only nonprofit architecture firms in the world. And they work with other nonprofits and government organizations to help magnify their impact. So Mass had started in Rwanda. I'll talk a little bit about that. And they had been there for about 10 years before I joined. And so when I went to Rwanda, one of the benefits is that it's a beautiful country and there's a lot to do outside of work. So this is us all going on a trek to go see the gorillas, which we were fortunate enough to do. But one of the first things I did when I got there was I went on safari, which is really akin to going camping out there. It's a couple of hours of a drive. You can camp in the park. There's an electric fence to protect you from all of the wildlife. And I thought I was going to see like elephants and lions, but one of the things that was really quite delightful is just the number of birds that we would see. And I actually got to understand a lot about the birds of East Africa from the people that I was working with and that I was spending time with. They knew a lot more than I did, and they got me into some birding. So I know who my audience is, so I'll share a few photographs that we purchased when I was in Rwanda, done by a Rwandan photographer. This is a Tarako. I used to see these in my yard all the time. They're quite beautiful, pretty big. The lilac-breasted roller, we would see these a lot in the safari park. They like to perch on top of trees, so you can see them quite clearly, and they're pretty bright. The crested crane is the national bird of Uganda, which is neighboring, but it's endemic to East Africa. They're really quite beautiful. We got to see some in the wild do their mating dance, which is some of the local African dances actually based off of some of the mating dances between the birds. The black-headed weaver, which weaves its nest, and the trees are just full of these in the safari park. They're quite beautiful. Make a lot of bird noises, and it's really great to see them kind of popping in and out of their nests. The sacred ibis, which is
Wow.
looks like a really a scavenger when it's not flying, and then when it flies, it's just quite beautiful. And then the African openbill, which I had thought that this was initially the shoebill when I saw it in the wild. The shoebill is on the inset photo. The shoebill is actually the national bird of Rwanda. It's pretty scary when you see it up close. But I just wanted to share some of those with you all. Really, really amazing. I'm sure that some of you have probably been to Africa, specifically for the birds. If you ever get the chance to go, I very much encourage it. It's pretty amazing. I did get to see elephants and lions, quite close to our vehicle, in fact. And then, of course, I got to see the gorillas in Volcanoes National Park. This is a newborn gorilla with its mother. And every year, the gorillas have a naming ceremony. The government of Rwanda celebrates all of the newborns, and they have a celebration with the village people in nearby Musanze town to name all of the baby gorillas. The gorillas in Rwanda are a real success story. They're one of the few endangered species that have actually increased in population over the last 10 years. And that's in large part due to steps that the government of Rwanda has taken to protect their habitat and the work of the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So to kind of get into the design and the project, the organization that I worked for, Mass Design, was kind of founded on the idea that design is never neutral. It either hurts or it heals. And that's something that I've seen in practice, that any kind of mark that we're going to make onto the land can either hurt or it can heal. And if you want it to heal, you have to be very proactive in what it is that you try to bring to a particular project. It was founded in 2008 in partnership with a group of doctors called Partners in Health, which was led by Dr. Paul Farmer, who's on the left-hand side here. And Dr. Farmer was not only a physician, but he also led the Harvard School of Public Medicine and Public Health. And this is the original design team from Mass back in Rwanda, working on a hospital with Partners in Health. And students from Harvard, from the architecture school, went to one of his lectures at the public health school, and they said, "Who's your architect?" And he said, "An architect's never approached me before." And that was kind of the ethos of which Mass was started, is that on the fringes, on the margins, where people are doing really amazing work, design and equity around design might not be always accessible. So they worked with Partners in Health. They studied conditions in local hospitals, which you're seeing on the right-hand side here, and understood that in these rural settings that people were actually coming with like a bruise or a cut, and they were sometimes leaving with tuberculosis or with communicable diseases. And so the buildings were actually making people sicker. So they worked with Partners in Health to do some really simple things with design. They turned the building inside out so the corridors were on the exterior. They introduced large windows so that things could be naturally ventilated. And they did a lot of research at Harvard with the School of Public Health around airborne infection control within architecture. Something that became really relevant in 2020, especially when I was in Rwanda, not just in Rwanda, but all around the world when we were dealing with COVID-19 in hospitals. So that partnership on that hospital, which you see here, then led to an entire campus of doctors' housing and a University of Global Health Equity, and Mass kind of continued to blossom, realizing that this sort of service around architecture and design and health was really necessary. And this tree actually right here, I don't know if you can see where my cursor is, Dr. Farmer told us we had to save that tree when they developed the campus. And that's why the whole campus is kind of around that. And the idea that a doctor would say that nature and the environment is what's going to heal his patients was really inspiring. And I think from that came a kind of ethos around architectural practice. So from there, Mass grew to be an organization of not just architects, but landscape architects, engineers, mechanical, structural engineers, furniture designers, exhibit designers, researchers, basically whatever the project needed, we would kind of find ways to get it for our partners, and is now operating in about 4 offices worldwide. And I was a part of that growth back in 2018 when I joined the firm in Rwanda. This was a small piece of the team that worked on the Fossey Fund project. Architects, engineers, contractors that all kind of made it happen. And what we learned over the course of the 10 years before I got to Mass was this idea that human, ecological, and animal health are inextricably combined. So just to kind of explain this diagram a bit, what you're seeing in the middle here is land use in Rwanda in the year 1990. And the majority of what is green is forest, is untouched forest, whether it's rainforest or natural forest. What you're then seeing on the left-hand side is land use in 2017. And the majority of what you're seeing here as white is farmland. And with that change in land use, and Rwanda is one of the densest countries in the world, and farming is how people make their living. But with that radical change in land use, you see an increase in vector-borne diseases, and particularly in malaria. So malaria has actually increased since 1990 in the country of Rwanda, despite all of the sort of treatments that are available. Contracting the disease is actually much higher. So what do we do? What do we do about that? The government has been really supportive of having conservation agriculture and understanding that its natural resources are also a huge economic driver of getting tourists, both domestically and internationally. So this is a photo still that I took from the movie Black Panther. This is Volcanoes National Park. It was used as the setting for Wakanda in Black Panther. It's that beautiful. And the 5 volcanoes of the park are from left to right: Kirisimbi and Bosoke, Sabinyo, Gahinga, and Muhabura. I climbed Bosoke. That's the only one I was brave enough to climb. I was told it was the easy one, and it was one of the hardest things I've done in my life. But the Karasoke Research Center, if you've ever seen the movie Gorillas in the Mist, is where Dian Fossey set up her research center, and it's nestled right between Karasimbi and Bosoke. So those 2 words together is where she got the word Karasoke. And Dian Fossey is maybe one of the most famous Americans to go to Rwanda. She arrived in 1966 to study the gorillas as part of 3 primatologists that were studying gorillas, orangutans, and chimpanzees. Her research around gorillas has never stopped since she got there. So the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund is the longest running primate study in the world, and one of the longest studies of any animal or any species in the world. This was her original cabin that was photographed in National Geographic back in 1969. And the recordings that she would do, her writings in that cabin, and then of course the very close relationship that she had with gorillas, understanding their behaviors and how similar they are to us. And the Fossey Fund, like Mass, has grown tremendously in that time. It is primarily Rwandan run as well. They have outreach programs to school children. They train conservationists and park rangers that go out into the forest every day. And one of the biggest things that they do is, in addition to studying the gorillas, they study the entire ecology around the gorillas so that they can know that the health of the environment that they're living in can contribute to the individual health of all of the gorillas. And their motto is helping people and saving gorillas. So when we were approached by the Fossey Fund, we understood that they were wanting to be able to get a bit closer to the gorillas in terms of where their physical campus was. And what you're seeing here is, on the left-hand side is the Volcanoes National Park, and that white line is the park boundary. What has happened, similar to those maps that I showed, is that there's been deforestation for agriculture and for the surrounding villages. But the government of Rwanda is currently working toward expanding the park boundary. So what you see here in the green. And what we did is work with the Fossey Fund to help them find a site that would be closer to that eventual park boundary. They were physically located, that building that you saw was located in Musanze town, which is about a 45-minute-hour drive away from the park. And once they realized that they wanted to be close to the park itself, they also wanted the campus to start to reflect and be an extension of the park, and provide an example of how some of that land that's been used for agriculture could be redeveloped in the future. So they really wanted to be a pilot site for what was possible. So in that, we kind of started the design understanding what all of the different ecologies were nearby. So Mount Sabinyo, which was one of the volcanoes in the park, is the closest volcano to the site. And we studied these different ecologies, and luckily we had all of these researchers from the Fossey Fund who could give us information about plant life and wildlife of what it is that they were hoping to see. So it was a real collaboration. We were inspired by Diane's original tents with the architecture and the buildings that were on the site, the idea that they could be kind of nestled within the trees, and that we could express the canopy. And this worked its way into the physical form, where all of these roofs that you're seeing have green roof on top of them, with some local pollinator plants. And then there's also a use of the local volcanic stone, which is used by a lot of the farmers in the region. They kind of dig it up when they go to plant their potatoes, which is the primary crop that's grown there. And then they discard it. They make walls out of it. So we used it in a lot of different ways, as floor tile, as wall cladding, as gravel when it gets ground down, within the actual architecture. But what's, I think, really transformative about this project isn't the buildings, even though I'm an architect. It's really the site and the way that the site was used. So the site mostly consists of 3 main buildings. The first one, the one that's the closest, is the Conservation Center, which is holds a lot of the original artifacts from Dian Fossey's life and her work. It's fully open to the public, and it helps tell the story of the Fossey Fund and the conservation work that they're doing. The second building is the Educational Center. This is where they do a lot of their outreach with school children. They also have researchers and students that come on a sort of sabbatical and rotating basis. There's also housing for those researchers and students. And they do a lot of outreach also to the local community. So things like teaching parents about why it's important to educate girls, and things that are kind of necessary within the community. And the third building is their research center, which is where they do a lot of their sample collection and testing. So when they go out into the forest, they do a lot of sampling of gorilla feces to see how the gorilla's health is. They'll do some testing of some of the plant life that's out there to kind of gauge its health, to make sure that what the gorillas are eating and is according to what it should be. But I think 2 of the things that were really key on this project that brought back the biodiversity weren't the buildings. And I'll talk a little bit about these 2 key parts of the project. The first is the nursery, which is the plants that were grown and cultivated locally and then planted around the campus. And the second is this constructed wetland, which is where a lot of the flora and fauna have appeared since the campus was completed. So the constructed wetland is basically a way of dealing with wastewater. And Rwanda is very hilly, unlike Florida. And so we have a lot of opportunity to use that elevation change and the natural flow of water and gravity to be able to clean and purify the water before releasing it into the municipal systems. So all of the wastewater is collected at a central point, and the septic tank is actually right here. And then it's fed through a series of water chambers to clean the water, and then fed into a leach field, which you're seeing here, these kind of smaller indentations that then either allow it to penetrate into the groundwater. And what gets released is just the effluent. So all of the solid waste is collected in the septic tank uphill, and then the effluent is released and purified as it goes down and brought into the groundwater. And then overflow is brought into a holding basin. So a lot of the frogs and birds that have been seen on the campus since completion is actually in this area, which is a more elegant way of dealing with wastewater. The second thing was the nursery. So working with the researchers, they knew the plants that were available in the park, and were able to give us just some really great resources. They came to us with a list of about 130 plants, and what's interesting in Rwanda is that there's not a lot known in the local nurseries about native species. There's a lot known about imported species and flowering plants and things that are supposed to look pretty and expensive. but not a lot of knowledge around the local plants. So even going to a nursery and asking for a particular name of a plant, a grower might not know about it. So it was really a hunt to try to find these plants. And we couldn't go into the park and just grab them and steal them and propagate them. We had to go out and find them. And so the researchers were like, good luck. And we ended up coming back with about 110 of these plants. This was actually our planting schedule within the campus. So 250,000 plants were propagated in the nursery during construction. And then the somewhat mature plants were then transported to the campus to start their growth cycle. A couple of other things about the project I'd be remiss not to mention, even though it's not necessarily about biodiversity, was we started a construction company to do this project, in part because we saw a huge potential for community and local impact. And so 50% of the people working on the project were women. And that's right, women construction workers in Rwanda. And there were a lot of trainings. About 300 people received certifications through the process of construction. So kind of working beyond the building in what architecture can do. All of the furniture was procured locally and designed by a group of designers and taken from about 80 different artisans that were found around the country: weavers, ceramicists, upholsterers, woodworkers, metal workers. And then a huge part of the Fossey Fund's mission is to be able to generate the next cultivate the next generation of conservation activists within Rwanda. And all of the rangers that go into the park are Rwandan, which is really great to see. And so their original campus in Musanze had about 2,000 students that had gone through its building within about 10 years when it was in that location. Within the first 6 months of the Fossey Fund campus, about 4,000 students had gone through the new buildings. So being able to increase their impact and tell that story around conservation is a huge part. And I think that that's something that Audubon also understands and knows. Building community around what it is that we love about nature is part of the way to preserve it. So just to kind of come back to the site for a second, since the completion of the site in 2022, there's been a lot of research done by the Fossey Fund researchers on the campus, not just in the park, but on the campus itself. So this is snippets from an article that was released in March of this year about 3 years since the campus has opened. What have we seen? And these are just some of the species that have been noticed on the campus. And I think some of the key things are that there's a recurring presence of species, usually restricted to the native habitats of the Volcanoes National Park, which is, let's just to remind, the park is still where the white line is. It hasn't been extended as far as where the black line is. But there are species that are being seen there. There's also migratory birds that are using the campus as this sort of patch within the agricultural fields that it's currently located within. And then other species like the Karasimbi tree frog and others are being seen around the campus. And this kind of shows a before and after of the agricultural land that was there previously to the restored reforested area that's there now. So how much time do I have, Margie? About 15 minutes.
You're doing fine.
Doing good? Okay, great. So I want to just kind of zoom out a little bit because I kind of learned all of this as trial by fire of being on the design team, working with landscape architects, working with contractors, working with the Fossey Fund. And I was then able to kind of understand a little bit more as I continue to work in Rwanda about landscape ecology. So this is where I get to kind of let you all know a little bit more about my world. And so I think, when we talk about landscape architecture, traditionally what we were talking about is really a designer imposing will on the land, making it beautiful, but making it something that was really about human occupation. And this is a drawing on the left-hand side of Central Park, which we know is beautiful and is home now to many different species, but was kind of constructed completely artificially. So all of the topography that you experience, all of the rocks that you see there, they've all been superimposed upon the landscape. The other side of the coin is restorative ecology or ecological restoration that says, let's try to go pre-Anthropocene, let's go, before humans were here, what did the land look like and how can we be as pristine as we can? And both of these have room in the conversation for land development. What usually happens is something in between, something about, understanding that there's always going to be pen to paper, there's always going to be decisions made, but there are things that we can understand about what ecologies need to make sure that all of that is in the mix as we're creating, so that we have space for humans, animals, and plants, because we need all three. And my dad, who's here, would also say bacteria, and I'm completely in agreement with that. But that we need to create ecologies for everybody, not just for humans. So kind of understanding a bit about landscape ecology. Not sure why that isn't showing up, but I'll show it here and then continue on. There's certain terms that we use, ways that we understand landform in a way that we can codify it. Things like edges, interiors, when we have urban environments and natural environments, we talk about how connective a particular habitat might be, how fragmented that habitat might be. And then we understand different patterns as well, as the idea that there might be islands or patches. Right now, the Fossey Fund is kind of a patch within agricultural land. In the future, it will be a part of an edge with agricultural land. But it's still really successful as something where species are able to migrate to. We continue onward. And so some kind of key concepts around landscape ecology when we're thinking about how to develop land with landscape there are some really basic principles. The first is that straight lines are maybe less beneficial than having more edge through either curvilinear or irregular lines. Having pieces and patches outside of a particular boundary are really helpful because they create a different set of ecologies right next to a larger set of ecologies. Having a kind of more convoluted way of having patches within each other can also increase the number of species. And you want to have a nice amount of interiority for certain species, as well as edges for other species. So these are things that we kind of come back to when working on projects to understand what sort of habitats we might be creating, not just for people, but for plants and animals. Other kind of key ideas are this is particularly true for architects, when considering siting a building on a site, to realize that you might be able to create more space, more interiority, more edge, depending on where the building is on that site. So for example, if the building's in the middle of the site versus on the edge of a site, you could have more opportunity. And then when you start to piece that together with your neighbors, you create a lot more connectivity, as opposed to kind of keeping to boundaries within a certain site. your land can contribute to your neighbors by creating corridors and connective threads for different species to be able to inhabit. And then when you bring that all together on the urban scale, you can start having tremendous impact. And this is one thing that, I really carried forward with me in coming back to the United States. The first place I stopped was in Boston, and I was there for about a year. And Boston's very famous for its emerald necklace. If you've ever been to Boston, this down here is Boston Common. And you're able to walk or take a bike kind of through the emerald necklace, all the way over to, Jamaica Plain and the Arnold Arboretum and Franklin Park. And it's a really great way in which, urban and animal and plant life can come together to be able to coexist. Kind of coming home to Florida, one thing that I was really excited to see is the Florida Wildlife Corridor project, which takes something like the emerald necklace and explodes it to the entire state of Florida. So we know that there's some conserved lands, there's other areas for opportunity and growth. And obviously a lot of this has to do with the Florida panther, but there's many other, obviously, animals that are in need of these migratory patterns and corridors around the state, especially as development continues to grow. And this is it's not there yet, but it's been a really successful project so far. Other examples of kind of whether you have a heavy hand or kind of lighter hand. The High Line in New York, if you've ever been to New York City and the High Line, this is kind of up for debate, which one you prefer. The picture on the left was taken before any landscape architect touched the High Line. The picture on the right is what's happened since architects and landscape architects had their hand. There's probably, in some ways, more of a diversity of plant and animal life that's there now. But there is also something really special about what was there when wilderness was allowed to just kind of take over. Another example in Philadelphia, kind of the same idea, a rail project. Only a small segment has been designed, but the larger segment that is not in public or private ownership has just been completely taken over by wild. So I don't know. I won't answer that question for you. You can decide for yourself whether or not you think one is more ecologically diverse than the other. But coming back to Florida, I think what I've really found is that there's just tremendous impact that you can still have. Even if you don't have a big donor like Ellen DeGeneres, or you're working with researchers like we were at the Fossey Fund, that if every plot of land in Sarasota County didn't have St. Augustine grass and went for Florida-friendly landscaping and a diversity of plant life, we would have some of the most amazing wildlife corridors, I think, anywhere in the world. And so I wanted to just share a couple of examples of, what's possible. I think this is also something when it comes to, thinking about what we can do around climate change and, increasing our beneficial impact on the planet. There's a lot of things that you can't see. Recycling is something you can't necessarily see the benefits of once you do it. And I think that being able to plant what you can on the land that you own is something that it gives immediate impact in terms of what you see for pollinators, bird species, and what can be brought back and restored. So this is a subdivision in Bradenton that I visited a couple of years ago. And this is from Google, or just kind of driving around, very, very typical. Everybody's got the same mailbox. I've lived somewhere very similar to this, you know, that this is kind of what you see. Definitely there's trees, there's shrubs. But right across the street, right behind us, something a little different going on. And this house is owned by an arborist. And I believe she was fined by her neighborhood for doing something a little bit different on her site. But what you see here is just kind of a takeover with Florida-friendly landscaping, and then a huge diversity of wildlife that you see on her property. And there's space for people to enjoy. She has set up her studio, her workstations on the back porch to kind of have an indoor-outdoor experience. And then she's got bird feeders, and there were quite a few different species we saw out there. But also she feeds squirrels, and I think she knows all of them by name. They come and kind of feed out of her hand. So just a tremendous transformation that you've seen on one piece of land in what's mostly a suburban area of Florida. You know, kind of like everything that we're used to seeing, but a tremendous impact. And then just to bring things a little bit even closer to home, about 7 years ago, my parents bought this piece of property in Gillespie Park. It's a 50-foot by 100-foot lot. And this is what it looked like on the inside. You know, didn't look like you were in a city at all. And it was a little heartbreaking for me to see this, knowing that they wanted to put a house on it, which I was very supportive of. I'm an architect. But I knew that if we weren't careful, it was going to lose some of the quality that they loved about the site to begin with. And so there were 3 oak trees on this piece of property, one in the front, one in the middle, and one in the back. And we found that the one in the middle, the one that you're actually seeing right here behind my dad, was sick, that it was probably not going to last too much longer. And so we did choose to remove that tree and work the design around it. And they paid some really special attention to save the other 2 trees, and are now kind of working to bring landscape back, which we're starting to see some of the effects of. So these are stark differences, same site, of you know what the active building looks like. And the active building looks like something that isn't necessarily restorative and ecological. This is the tree, one of the trees that was saved. You can see it's clipping closely. The house was designed to kind of come in closer contact with the tree and save it. And then this oak in the back was also saved. And then my dad brought in some composting here to grow, which has been really successful so far in the 2 months or so that they've been in the house. So already we're starting to see blue jays, scrub jays, and cardinals all in this part of the site, and pollinators as well, butterflies coming back. And so I think that, you know, understanding that there is this sort of inherent you know, conflict between building and wanting to preserve, but if we think about what are the principles of what's needed to create ecology, we can definitely have a positive impact. So again, the Fossey Fund site, in the act of creation, what it looked like, you know, the messiness of construction, the kind of stripping that has to be done. We did save all the topsoil during the course of construction. And then this is what it looked like last year, where what I really love is that the buildings kind of start to disappear as the landscape is taking over, and as these ecologies are being brought back. So again, thank you all for your time, and for listening to a non-scientist talk about design and architecture. But you know, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that being able to plant in your backyard is one of the biggest impacts that you can have on restoring ecology.
Wow. Thank you so much. This is your talk is fascinating and very far-ranging. No, in a really interesting and provocative way. I'm fascinated, and I imagine everyone is, by looking at I guess the two extremes of like landscape architecture and ecological restoration. It's funny, my dad always wanted me to be a landscape architect, and I just didn't want to do that. And I used to live right next to the High Line, and I can tell you the old way was better.
Yeah.
Before they built anything there, because then everybody was there and all the celebrities and
Well, it's very
Anyway.
beautiful now, for sure. I was just there recently. I mean, it's packed on a weekend.
yeah,
All
and I
people.
live just right down the street, and that's one reason why I moved, because it just got to be bananas. But anyway, what a fascinating perspective, and I'm actually really moved by it. I think it's so important the way you're looking at things. We really need you not wandering, but we need you in the center of designing Sarasota and Manatee and Lakewood Ranch, and really teaching us all about ecology. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I think Sarasota is one of these places it's just fascinating to me. Having grown up here, I don't know if I always quite understood how wild it was. And seeing projects like the Legacy Trail happen, while I was away, and seeing how connected, how much people love the celery fields. Most people have to get in their car to get to the celery fields, and they do it. Imagine if it was connected to other assets to be able to get them from Siesta Key Beach all the way to the celery fields.
Oh, can you design that? Can you
I'd love
redesign it? You're hired. We need to reallocate all the dumb tax money.
But yeah, and I think that people in this community have a real understanding. They're already making it possible in a place where connectivity hasn't been prioritized in development. And so it's interesting to see how people are already using public spaces and advocating for public spaces, even though there's maybe not even the infrastructure to do it the way that you would want to. So it's a great group of people to be able to talk to.
I loved the house that you showed in Bradenton and what you can do. I live in a neighborhood similar to what you showed, and I try to plant like native and pollinator friendly, but I can take it so much further apparently that I'm not doing, and I am very inspired by that.
Yeah, well, the homeowner is an arborist, so we should be kind on ourselves in comparison. But yeah, it's been great to see my folks as they've completed their home and been in semi-retirement, to really love taking care of the land part of their home.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question about the fascinating structure you were building on what will eventually become the edge of the park? Is that I'm not sure I completely understand. They were building, I mean, it's a fascinating building, and I'm very moved by how it dovetails or moves, connects to the park itself. And what is the thinking that eventually the distance between the building and the edge of the forest will sort of move together, or kind of spread out?
It's a great question. So that sort of middle area
Yeah.
It is a much larger project and a separate project from this one. One that Mass has actually been a part of. But it is a restoration project for Volcanoes National Park. And so what they're doing is working with the farmers who own land there, working with them to understand what is a village in the 21st century look like? What do they need?
Oh,
They're then working on getting them land, getting them farmland, since they are very reliant on farming, and then and paying them for their land. But then taking that what is now agricultural land, that swath between, and restoring it back to the Volcanoes National Park ecology. Because right now the gorillas are actually running out of space.
oh,
And they've
And-
actually seen like more aggression happening between the gorillas because of the territorial nature of the different families and groups that move together.
oh, I see. And also by expanding the edge or the expanding the park, tourism is very important to Rwanda, is that, or gorillas?
It is. So ecotourism, conservation tourism is really key to the economy.
Yeah,
And I think, Rwanda's story since the genocide in 1994 has been incredible.
Yeah.
They've completely unified. They have a very, very strong leadership, and an understanding that they have this amazing landscape that people want to come see. And so preserving that and kind of working toward conservation, they've kind of been this huge success story in conservation as well. But they understand, I mean, and to be honest, it's after working on this project, it's kind of what inspired me to move back to Florida. And coming back to Florida wasn't necessarily something that was on my like to-do list. But this is also a place that understands that where nature is where our money is.
yes,
We have to preserve it because that's why people come here.
Yes.
right.
And we have to preserve it in a way which isn't overrun by the people. So for example, with the gorillas, they only give out about 60 permits every day to go see them. And so you have to kind of wait in line to be able to go see them. You are with a guided tour when you go. You get 1 hour with the gorillas and then you come back after your hike out there. It's depending on the day, you could be doing a really treacherous hike or it could be really easy. It's just wherever the gorillas are, you have to go there. So it's the way that it's a very heavy hand that the government has taken with conservation. But it's also been a real success story.
I have a
And it's
question.
it's
Oh, sorry.
very moving.
I have a question for you because this is very pressing now here in Sarasota.
Yeah.
What should we advocate for as far as code changes or things that we can incorporate? Like we can ask the county commissioners to consider in our comprehensive plan when building a development. Like we are rewilding the quad parcels and that's been viewed very positively. And I think they'd like to see more things like that. But it's such a daunting thing when you're looking at a cow pasture that they're now proposing is going to be 14,000 homes. What can we ask for or advocate for to make that space more wildlife friendly?
That's a great question. And I think there's probably a lot of other people that have more comprehensive answers than I do. I think with the comp plan, being able to incentivize how a particular site gets developed. And this is actually something that we've brought up with the city of Sarasota, which is that all four sides of a building kind of have the same level of incentive, but the sun's in the southern hemisphere. It's all four sides of the building shouldn't get designed the same way. Some sides need shade and sometimes some sides should have a lot of windows. So being able to develop your site in a way that allows you to connect with your neighbors and create some of those connectivity and corridors, I think would be a huge advantage in terms of like incentivizing, hey, maybe we'll allow more setback here and less setback here so that you can take the space for people and be able to prioritize the space for other species. I think as far as I know the development that you're talking about is in those particular developments. Well, I think in general, having the county buy up the floodplain as conservation is a huge piece. The other part of it is that anything that goes from that ag to development has to go through a rezoning process.
Yeah.
What's really unclear is what the science says. So, the comp plan might say you need a 20-foot setback. Somebody might give you and say, oh, okay, we'll do better than that. We'll do a 60-foot setback. Truth is, we don't know. We don't know if it's 60 feet. We don't know if it's 600 feet. And I think advocating for real science and studies about what do ecologies need in order to thrive. Because that's not something that the comp plan is necessarily, there to support. It's there to support what we can and can't do in terms of development. So being able to get real information together about, because maybe we can support people right next to the celery fields. I don't know. I don't think we can that many people that close. But an understanding and advocating for what the science would say, I think is the question, and getting some ecologists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we come back to Rwanda for a minute?
Yeah.
Leslie Austin is asking, how long will it take until that land is restored to its previous condition for the gorillas? Do the gorillas go into the farmland as well, or do they stay in their more dense habitat?
Good, great question. During COVID, they limited any people going into see the gorillas until they knew how to deal with protocol. And during that time, the gorillas got really adventurous and they went into the farmland. And you could see the gorillas, they would jump the fence and they would go into the farmland. They were like, oh, no people are coming in here. We're gonna venture out there. So they do currently kind of feel that hit. The goal, I can't remember the exact date. I think it was by 2030 that they would start phasing in different sectors of the park. Last year, Mass, the former company I worked for, I should give a plug for Sweet Sparkman, that's who I work for now. But Mass Design completed a comprehensive plan for the redevelopment and the rewilding of that section of Volcanoes National Park. And I think that they want to implement the first staunch of it by 2030. And then it comes pretty fast. Once you get the plants in there, once you get, and open it up, it turns wild pretty fast.
Bryn Curtis says, I got to go to see the gorillas in 2010 twice. Up Rwanda mountains and once in Uganda. One of our guides worked with Dian Fossey. It was amazing. Yeah,
a lot of the guides knew her, or some of the older ones ended up knowing her too. And it's pretty amazing. And now a lot of the guides are of a new generation that talk about being a school child, going to the Fossey Fund and being inspired, and then going to university and studying conservation. And now the Fossey Fund is gearing up for the second phase of what they want to do. And it's, I think where they want to go with it is have a conservation university, and be able to kind of really focus on education, because they realize what they're doing in Rwanda could be, used globally.
I can't thank you enough for this talk. I'm very touched and inspired, and I hope everyone is, by what you reported and what you're doing now. And I'd really like, it's maybe kind of unrealistic. I really want to encourage you. You're younger than certainly I am. I really want to encourage you to speak out and educate. You're good at it. And, it's humbling to see you're out there in Rwanda, but we need you right here also.
Well, that's why I came back is,
Well, bless you.
This is my home and my community, and I'm, more than, grateful to be from here. And so thank you so much for the kind words, everybody, and for your attention on a Monday evening. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'd like to read what Jenny Cherry put in the comments a little earlier.
Please.
She absolutely fascinating is right. What a blessing your talent and degree is and where it has brought you. I love the designs of the new research center in Rwanda, how it fits in the landscape. I'm also really blessed to have lived next door to 2 Florida native gardeners, and they have a healthy edible garden and environment for animals. We now plant similar plants, and they share with us plants and fruit trees. We have a greater number of butterflies and songbirds in our backyard. So it happens. And Pam Callender, I want to put a big plug. She does the talks on Saturdays at the Nature Center, and she has that program called Lifelines that connects corridors in people's backyards. And she's been doing that for years, and it's really great. She's gotten some grants and is connecting up pollinator lifelines. So right in Sarasota.
It's Pam.
So there's a lot we can focus on for the positive good. So, please go out there and teach everybody what they need to know. You and your father are a really big boon to our community, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Megan.
the Audubon site is one that I love being able to visit when I'm at the celery fields. I think what you guys are doing out there is also an amazing example. So thanks so much for leading by example.
One last comment in the Q&A, Betty Matthews, Wade was our conservation chair for many, many years.
And Betty ran the Sarasota Audubon as well.
Yeah, so she said, Wade and I ambled the mountain in 2010 to see the gorillas. Fascinating. That's very cool, Betty.
Karen, who is it that does Lifelines? What's her name?
Pam Callender. Pamela Callender. You can, yeah, we can connect you to her. She's a member of Sarasota Audubon as well as the Florida Native Plant Society. So yeah,
Light, just a lovely human being.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for the invite and for your time.
All right. Well, thank you.
We'll
And,
see you next year. And
yeah, this is it for the season, and we'll be back in, when do we start these? In September or October? October. All right. So, all right. Good night, all.
Thank you.
Good night.